How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So I'm going to be talking about how to raise chickens for eggs. I'm going to be giving you a step-by-step guide on how to get started so that you can start your journey as smoothly as possible. Let's get started. So the first thing you need to do is check with your county or city's ordinances. You want to make sure that chickens are not completely illegal before going and buying a structure and setting up your coop and your enclosure and your run and all those kinds of things. It'd be quite a waste of money if you were to build your infrastructure for chickens only to find out later or get a letter in the mail like we did that your chickens were not permitted. This happened to us. We found out that there was this massive application process and you had to pay a yearly fee, and you actually had to get permission from your neighbors in order to have chickens. And this is, again, in rural Virginia. It was really quite crazy. We ended up fighting those ordinances, but you don't have to do that. If you want to save yourself the headache, you're going to want to just check the ordinances and the laws right up front just to make sure that you're not going to run into any issues. So step 2 is going to be buying or building a chicken coop. Folks, you don't have to go overboard with your chicken coop. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be fancy. And you're going to get 100 different opinions from 100 different experts on the internet on which direction your coop should face, the shape of your coop, what color you should paint it so that you can get the most eggs. And quite honestly, it doesn't have to be that complicated. You just need to get a box for them to live in where it's going to keep them warm at nights while they're sleeping and roosting, but also keep the wind and the draft away from them to help them regulate their heat. You don't actually even have to put a heater in these coops. They will self-regulate on their own as long as you keep them dry. That's really the key here. And as far as what they lay their eggs in, you can get really fancy. I went completely overboard with my chicken coop and ended up building this kind of palace of a chicken coop with a special area for them to lay their eggs. And a lot of chicken coops that you buy will have those, but you don't really need that. You could use an old goat house, medium-sized dog house. You can actually use crates for them to lay their eggs in and just throw some hay or straw in there. You could actually use used tires if you wanted to, if you had them laying around. I've heard of people doing this. Again, it doesn't have to be as fancy, but you can make it as fancy or complicated as you want. We ended up buying a used chicken coop. It was a 4x4 and it came with an enclosure, which we're going to cover in the next step. And we paid $150 for this coop, and this let us get started right away with getting eggs from our chickens. I think we had chickens for 2 weeks before we started getting eggs. We bought them as pullets, so they were already raised and ready to start producing eggs. And that was really nice because it gave us some encouragement that, hey, this is really the right way to go. We didn't have to wait several months raising them from chicks. However, you can do that if that's what you want to do. But again, as long as your chicken coop is keeping them dry and keeping the wind and rain out of where they're sleeping and is fully enclosed and secure. So this means that they will not be able to get out unless you go and open the door, because we close them up and we secure them every night. You got to keep them safe from those nighttime predators, and that's the best way to do it, is with a solid chicken coop. So in step 3, you're going to decide whether you want to have an enclosure or not. So an enclosure is a separate structure from the chicken coop itself. It is fully secure, 360 degrees, top to bottom, side to side, fully screened in area for them to kind of free range just a little bit. It's not going to obviously be as big as free ranging in your front yard or a field or something like that. But again, this is a fully secure area. This is their fully secured free range area. And what's nice about an enclosure is that it gives you flexibility to maybe go visit friends or family or get away for a night or 2 or even 3. We went the first couple of years with an enclosure, and then we spent a year without an enclosure, and we found out that the convenience factor having the enclosure was pretty nice because it gave our chickens an area to kind of be outside and in the sun and digging for worms and bugs, but gave us the peace of mind that they were secure while we are away. Now, if you have people that you trust that can come and take care of your chickens on a daily basis, they can get there during first light to let the chickens out and collect the eggs and maybe check on them throughout the day, then that maybe will be a situation where you don't necessarily need an enclosure. And also, if money is tight and you just can't afford the lumber or the fencing to build your enclosure, then that's also a factor that can come into play. And you can always add the enclosure later. Just kind of plan ahead a little bit. And as far as the size of the enclosure itself, we had an 8x8 enclosure, and it was perfectly fine for 4 birds. However, if you're going to be keeping them locked up in an 8x8 enclosure, even with just 4 birds, then you can expect that enclosure area to be dug up and turned to dirt and mud in pretty much no time. And the other nice thing about the enclosure is in the wintertime, you can throw a tarp over the top, and it gives them additional outside space to kind of scratch and do things when there's snow on the ground, because a lot of times chickens just don't like going in the snow. So it's kind of a little bit multi-purpose. And again, as far as the size goes, again, we had an 8x8 for 4 chickens, and it can get tore up pretty quickly, especially in the winter. However, in the summertime, when you can let them out in the bigger free range area, their actual free range area, then it really doesn't become a problem. So again, the enclosure is optional, but it's just something to think about. And there's definitely some nice conveniences and kind of a sense of security and peace of mind when you go somewhere for a few nights that your chickens are going to be safe. Now, step 4 is going to be their chicken run or their free range area. This is going to be essentially where your chickens are going to be out scratching for bugs. They're going to be just out and about. They're not in an enclosure. They're not in the coop, but they're just out doing their thing. They're searching for food. They're doing all kinds of stuff, right? And now the size of the range will just depend on how much space you want to give them and how much money you want to spend on fencing. I recommend 2x4 fencing, or at the largest 4x4 fencing. We actually have a section on one side of our free range area that's 4x4 fencing, and then on the front portion of that, or the other side of that fencing, is 2x4, and we've never had any chickens escape through the 4x4. So I don't think 4x4 is going to be problematic if you're worried about your chickens escaping through that fence. We have 2,000 square feet for our 10 chickens, our 10 hens, and I would say that's pretty big even for 10 chickens. However, you don't have to go quite that crazy. We just want to give them plenty of space to roam about and do their thing. They have a shaded area they can go to. They have a tree they like to sit under. They kind of have their own little ecosystem there. And it's fenced in, and the reason why we fence it in is because we have neighbors with dogs, and we have dogs too, and we just like to keep them as safe as possible. It keeps other animals kind of out of their area, right? That's their area. They know that they're safe in there. They're not even afraid of the dogs when the dogs come up to the fence anymore, because they know that they can't get through the fence. And so the chickens actually kind of cluck and laugh at the dogs when the dogs go up to the fence and bark at them. It's really quite entertaining. However, you don't actually have to do fencing, right? Because that is more money in terms of infrastructure costs. And if you don't have pets or animals that you're worried about getting to your birds and killing your birds or harming your birds, then you don't have to worry about fencing in a free range area. You can just let them roam about your property in any fashion that you want, quite honestly. And in the evenings, the chickens will go back to their coop and start roosting and go to sleep. So it really is up to you. And again, the free range space is kind of up to you on how much space you want to give them. A lot of people don't even fence it in. They just let the chickens do their thing. We would do that, except our dogs are a little rambunctious, and we don't quite trust that they won't eat them. And we've actually had one of our dogs pull a chicken through the fence, through underneath the fence. And so we know, like, hey, you know what? Let's just go ahead and secure the fence as much as possible. It's a loose area of the fence. It was my fault. Because I didn't secure the fence properly. I hadn't finished nailing it to the fence post, essentially, so it peeled back a little bit. And yep, it is what it is, right? So you get, depending on the situation, will depend on how much free range space or what kind of chicken run you're going to want to give them. And of course, if you don't have a lot of space and you want to keep them secure, you can get one of those mobile free range type deals where it's on wheels and it rolls around. But I just feel like that gets a little bit complicated. If you just give them enough space to begin with, you don't have to worry about wheeling some cage around your yard and doing those kinds of things. I don't see a whole lot of benefit to doing that. Some people will argue that it fertilizes your lawn, or you can roll this thing over your garden and they'll fertilize your garden and compost your garden for you. However, I'm really about the simplicity. I like the chickens are kind of used to where they're at. They know where the good bugs are in their free range space. And so we just like letting, being consistent and letting them be in their own kind of static area. So step 5 is going to be picking up a feeder and maybe some feed to supplement their diet. Now, you don't have to necessarily give them feed, but I can tell you this, when there is snow on the ground, it really is nice to have some extra food for them to kind of just get them through the winter. And it depends on how long you have snow on the ground. Right here in Virginia, our snow doesn't tend to last more than a week, although this year we had standing snow for 4 weeks, which was kind of a record for me. I've been here for 25 years and I haven't seen snow stay on the ground for that long. And so we did have to give them a little bit of feed to help them out during that period of time. And so, of course, you're going to want to find a good organic feed where there isn't any GMO plants and substances in that feed. And then when it comes to the feeders, y'all just get the cheap $10, $20 plastic or aluminum feeder. You just pour the feed in and they nibble on that, set it up on a center block, and you're good to go. Of course, if you want to spend $80 or $100 on these automatic feeders, you can do that. But again, it's just kind of a waste of money, and it really doesn't necessarily help your chickens at all. It just makes it so that you don't necessarily have to go out there as often. But if you're going out there to pick up eggs anyway, then you know what? It's an extra, I think, 15 seconds to check their feed and maybe refill it. And we keep our feed in a trash can, and it makes it super easy just to refill. And I think we're spending, $7 a week on total maintenance costs per week. That's the average per week throughout the whole year. And so it's really not that bad considering that a dozen of eggs these days is going for $8 to $14. So again, you don't have to get really crazy with the feed and feeders other than just making sure you pick out a high quality feed. I recommend looking for a local farmer that produces their own feed. You're going to get better quality. It's going to be stored in better conditions, and it's just going to be better for your chickens. So the next step is keeping your chickens hydrated. Folks, this is super easy. You can go and get an old dog bowl or an old piece of Tupperware, fill it up with water, put it up off the ground, and the chickens will be perfectly happy. But I will let you know this, chickens tend to be a little bit dumb sometimes, and they'll actually jump up in their water in that situation and defecate in their water, and it just makes their water dirty, and then just kind of dirtying and diseasing their own water source, their own water supply. They aren't that smart to stay out of their water and keep their own water clean, which is kind of where a water fountain comes in handy. Again, $10 to $30. You can get an aluminum water fountain where the water is fully secure. The chickens can't get into it and poop in it and step on it. It has a little rim where the water trickles out and they drink from that. It's kind of like a little watering trough just for chickens, and that's what we recommend for watering. We get 2 of those. That way in the wintertime when it freezes outside and the water's freezing, we can just swap them out. You can keep one inside and one outside and just keep rotating them that way. It does make it a little bit more convenient. However, if you live in an area where you don't have to worry about that, all you need to do is get one and you should be good to go. Again, I think one of these chicken fountains we're basically using for 10 hens. So you don't really need to get a whole bunch of different water fountains. They all kind of share and do their own thing. And there's plenty of space, 360 degrees around that water fountain for them to get water. So let's talk a little bit about bedding. If you add some straw and pine shavings to the floor of your chicken coop, it'll help keep the chicken coop a little bit more dry because it will absorb the moisture and it will absorb their pee and poop. And when they defecate, those pine shavings or straw will absorb that, and it'll just make it a little bit easier for you to clean out with a shovel later on. It's not very expensive at all. Straw and pine shavings are pretty cheap, and you can use mulch. You can use just about anything, but the pine shavings and the straw just makes it a little bit easier, and it's a little bit more available. So now let's talk about getting your actual chickens. Folks, you can get just about any breed of chicken out there that will lay eggs and it'll be fine. We went with golden comets because we did a little bit of research and we just felt those were the best chickens for our climate. They adjust their temperature really well to cold weather. You can go from cold one day to freezing cold the next. And in Virginia, it can quite literally be 70 degrees one day and 25 degrees the next. That has actually happened, and that happens multiple times per year. So the golden comets for us were the best option because they were best at regulating their heat and able to basically deal with the crazy fluctuating temperatures that we sometimes get in Virginia. However, you're just going to want to do some research on the breed for where you live and kind of go with what you need for your own specific area. What I do recommend though is starting off, if you're starting off with 4 birds, try to get them as pullets. So pullets are basically chickens where they're maybe a week or 2 away from laying eggs. They're not adults necessarily, but they're not baby chicks either. Because if you go and buy, say from Tractor Supply or a co-op, and you get your first birds as chicks, you may not know whether they're male or female, and you might actually end up with some roosters. So getting some pullets to start off with will save a little bit of frustration. You'll spend a little bit more money. But then again, you know what? Once you get those birds, they're going to be the gift that keeps on giving. And then you can start adding more birds to your flock and expanding from there. So when it comes to predators, we have not lost a chicken yet to a predator. However, if you have a concern about predators or feel that your chickens may be a little bit more prone to predators, then building an enclosure will help give you a little bit of peace of mind. And then just letting them in their free range area for a certain amount of time, that's going to add a little bit more work. We really don't worry about it. We currently do not have an enclosure, and we just let them free range all day. And we really haven't had any problems. But when the problems come up, it's really when the predators lose their food source. For example, if there's snow on the ground for weeks at a time, hawks are going to not have a food source because the mice and the rodents and things like that are going to be burrowed in the ground. They're not going to be coming out. And so those hawks may go after chickens if the opportunity presents itself. A lot of people recommend crows, but we do not recommend trying to get crows into the area because crows actually contain bird flu. They've been infected with bird flu in a lot of different areas, and so it's really, really risky to bring any kind of wild birds into your area. And disease prevention is a pretty important aspect of owning chickens. And if you're interested in how to protect your chickens against bird flu, definitely going to want to check out the video. I'll leave a link below. I did a video specifically on protecting your chickens from bird flu. But as far as predators go, we have some dogs that basically are roaming the perimeter fence of our free range chicken area. And so predators just haven't really been an issue for us overall. We also lock up our chickens in their chicken coop every single night, just about every single night at least. Some of the warmer nights we'll kind of let that go, but for the most part, the chickens do pretty good just leaving them be and leaving them to their own devices. But again, the enclosure in step 3 is an option if that does worry you, or if you're in an area, or if you need to go away for a period of time. The enclosure does make it a little bit nice and give you a little bit of extra peace of mind. Well, folks, that's a wrap for this guide. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this will help you get started with raising chickens for eggs. Folks, don't be afraid to go and get some chickens and to try the chicken route. I'm telling you right now that it is truly the gift that keeps on giving. It is the ultimate survival food. It's the ultimate way to start being self-sufficient. Owning chickens is really quite an amazing experience, and I really highly recommend that everybody at least give it a shot. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.